But I always like to say that, the woman who is going to invent the solution to cold fusion isn't even working on her equations right now because she's going keto for the third time this year. She's trying to get to the gym to run a bit because she thinks that it'll help. She's not even working on her equations. There is so much human potential and purpose and mission driven positive action that's not happening because people are focused on their food and their weight. And that's what bright line eating is about, is freeing up all of that human capacity so that people can be focusing on their life instead of what the bathroom scale is telling them in the morning.
Welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I'm Lisa Roers, your host, and hey, thanks for joining me today. I'm here just to pour some positive back into your day with practical tips and stories to encourage and inspire. So let's dive in. Hello and welcome back to the Sunshine Cafe. I am Lisa Roers, your host, and I am so excited today for you guys to meet my guest. Today's guest is someone who's changed thousands of lives, if not millions. Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson is the founder and the voice behind Bright Line Eating, which is a powerful program that is helping people not only lose weight, but also regain peace, joy, and freedom again around their food so they can live happy, healthy, and free. Susan developed this program from a sincere place of authenticity. She knows and she understands because she has been there. Her journey from the deepest, darkest depths of addiction to then becoming a tenured psychology professor and a best-selling author, well, that's nothing short of inspiring and encouraging at every level. But what I really love about Susan is her very real and relatable personality and her unique ability to wrap neuroscience, behavioral psychology, and all of this deep personal experience she has together to help us uncover what's actually keeping us stuck. And more importantly, how we can break free. And she explains it in such an easy way that anybody can understand the what, the why, and the how. So today's conversation is a lot more than just about food or bright lines. Today is about reclaiming hope. It's about healing physically and emotionally, and it's about learning how to enjoy life happy, healthy, and free. And not because you got that daughter's wedding on the calendar or the school reunion, or even the vacation you're hoping to enjoy in your swimsuit. No, it's so you can enjoy life happy, healthy, and free for the rest of your life. Okay, so with all of that, Susan, it is my sincere honor to welcome you to the Sunshine Cafe. Thanks for being here.
Oh, Lisa, thank you. That was the best intro I've ever gotten. That was amazing. Thank you so much for that.
Well,
Yeah.
it's deserved. You have done so many things that I'm just really honored to have you here. And bright line eating is something I'm very familiar with. I've been following you and your work for quite a few years now. So I'm just curious, maybe since I'm really familiar with your work, but maybe not everyone is, let's talk a little bit about what bright line eating is and how it's changing so many different lives. Like, how is it so different from other approaches?
Well, it's completely different from other approaches. I mean, it's almost the anti diet or food plan. We tell people pretty much the opposite of what everyone else tells people, which might be why it works so well. Um, yeah, bright line eating is based on 4 bright lines. And that right there, it's different, right? Most approaches deal in various shades of gray and moderation. They say, well, do our program, but you can eat all your favorite foods and eat everything in moderation. And they give very little guidance about when to eat. There's kind of snacking or eating all day long. They give free foods that you can eat in unlimited quantities. And what we say is we're really working with primarily people who have a more addictive relationship with food. So people who often promise themselves they'll eat a little, but feel like they eat more than they intended once they get started. People who resolve to be on a plan and maybe do well for a while, maybe even for a long while, but then it sort of unravels on them and they don't know why. And so the 4 bright lines provide a lot more clarity and structure than most people are used to following. And at first, they sound horrifying. They absolutely sound ridiculous. Like, how could you ever imagine that anyone would want to do that? And I remember originally writing the book Bright Line Eating and putting those 4 bright lines out into the world, and I'm like, you don't really wanna tell people this. Nobody's gonna wanna do this." But the 4 bright lines are no sugar, no flour, eating only meals, like never grazing or snacking, and then bounding your quantities with a digital food scale. And it sounds so restrictive, but almost everybody who engages with it for even a pretty short amount of time ends up feeling super free. Because the meals are not small. Let me be clear. The meals are ample, but they're bounded. And so the minute you weigh them out and you get this beautiful big plate of totally satisfying whole real food. And on Bright Line Eating, you can eat every whole real food. So people will say, like some eating disorder experts or nutritionists will say, you can't tell people to eliminate whole food groups. And I'll just be like, how did sugar become a food group? Sugar is not a food group. In Bright Line Eating, we eat all proteins, dairies, fruits, nuts, legumes, seeds, vegetables, every single one, every one. But we don't eat processed foods. We don't eat ultra processed, sugar, flour. We don't eat snack foods. We don't eat foods born in a factory and poured into a plastic bag. We don't eat those foods. They're not really food, y'all. And so we eat all real food and no sugar, no flour, 3 meals a day, and weighed and measured quantities, and then life just gets really expansive from there. That's really the foundation of it.
Yeah, and it's not restrictive at all, actually. You think about someone might think about a highway. There's a lot of structure around roads and driving, but knowing exactly what lane you need to be in and when you turn and that the cars around you are not going to run into you, that's really freeing and really makes you feel comfortable. And if anybody's ever driven in the US and then driven in India, you understand what I'm meaning. Those lines really help you feel comfortable and free.
Exactly. It's a
Yeah.
great metaphor. I love that. I often think of, because I've lived by the bright lines for most of the last, 22 years. And then there've been times where I've convinced myself that it's too restrictive and I should deviate. And what I feel like is when I'm on the bright lines, I'm sort of a train, like an Amtrak train or something that's zooming around our beautiful country. I'm in the United States, right? Zooming around and I see these vistas and I'm, through Utah and the Red Rocks, and then I'm in the Rockies, and then I'm over to the New England and I'm zooming around. And when I get off my bright lines, I say, this track is all I can do. I have to stay on this track and I oomph myself into some field somewhere. And then I just sit there. I can't do anything if I'm back in the food. I'm just eating. It's just silly. I just become a walking rumination machine. We were talking about this before we hit record, just how nauseating it is, how maddening to be ruled by what you've eaten or not eaten, whether you're on your plan or off your plan, how many miles, how many calories, how many pounds, how you feel about what you just ate, and how sick you feel because you overate. And maybe you'll eat less this morning because you're going to a party later tonight and you want to be able to eat more later, and what you're going to try to wear this weekend, and how you're going to need to eat less all week long because you want to look good this weekend. And but now you don't know if those pants are gonna fit, so you're gonna try them on. Oh, they're too small, so now you're gonna need to go somewhere and buy clothes, but you hate going into those stores because the lights are so bad and the mirrors are so awful and you're gonna look bad and ba 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 ba. And when I just eat my beautiful 3 abundant meals and I'm in my beautiful, divinely inspired, bright body that's right for my size, and I have lived with chronic obesity, I know what that torture is like. Oh, it's so much better to be bright.
Absolutely. Yeah. There and it affects so much more than just the what you're gonna wear and the vanity of what we look like, because it really affects our energy. It affects the clarity of our mind. It affects how well we can think and what kind of solutions we can bring to the table and how patient we are with our children. It affects everything. And I know that you know this so well from the history that you've had with addiction on other things. Tell us a little bit about how you drew the lines and the connections between the addiction that people have with food.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's gruesome. I'll go way back. I wasn't a fat kid. I was a chunky kid, just a little fleshy sometimes, and then I'd have a little growth spurt, lean out a little bit, but I was fleshier than some other people. Um, enough so that by the time I hit age 14, I was pretty concerned about my weight. I wasn't that big though. I was probably 5 or 10 pounds heavier than I am now. But I was 13, 14. And, um, I found drugs. And
Mhm.
this This was what year would this have been? I was 14 years old, so this would have been, like, 1988. It's 1988, and Nancy Reagan's Just Say No campaign is lighting up the airwaves, and we're all watching this cast iron skillet, "This is your brain,"
Oh,
and
no.
then an egg cracks into it, "This is your brain on drugs. Just say no." And I was all about it. I was gonna go to Harvard, I was a good student, and, I was never gonna do drugs ever, ever. And then I did mushrooms this one night, and I had the world's best experience. And our language is so terrible because, psilocybin mushrooms are in the same verbal category, drugs, as crystal meth and crack cocaine and fentanyl, right? Fentanyl didn't exist then. But anyway, I had this amazing spiritual experience on mushrooms, and I thought drugs aren't bad, they're good. And I lost 7 pounds that night. I mean, it was probably all water. I didn't eat anything all night. I tripped on shrooms, and then I slept for 24 hours, and then I walked out to the bathroom naked to weigh myself in the hallway bathroom, and my mom calls across the hallway, "Ooh, you look skinny." And I stepped on the scale and I had lost 7 pounds, and
Wow.
I'd had the best time. So my wh and there were some cute boys there, like, I just need to say it all
The
was a
perfect
big
storm.
package, the perfect storm. And my little 14-year-old, universe tilted on its axis. And I really do think, Lisa, in that moment, I resolved deep down to just do that every chance I could. Like, that was my new solution. And, it was pot, alcohol, mushrooms, acid, and ecstasy for a while, and then I found crystal meth, and it was game over. Crystal meth got me super skinny, but also made me feel like I was ready to conquer the world, and it also scrambled my brain completely. I mean, I now know it produces essentially schizophrenia. I mean, it's just an excess of dopamine in the brain, so I developed drug-induced psychosis. I dropped out of high school and I was hearing voices, and I occasionally thought I was the return of Christ, which is easy to do when you're really loaded and it's true that your mother's name is Mary and your father's name is Joseph. That's not a joke. That's my parents' names, and I'm an only child. And so I was just out there, man. And then I stopped doing crystal meth, and they found cocaine, and then I found crack cocaine, and then I turned to prostitution, and it just got ugly. And I was 20 years old. I had a shaved head and some piercings and a blonde wig on my head, and I was in this crack house, and I'd been there for days,
Mm.
and I had a moment of clarity. My beloved, loving, however it works, God, higher power spoke to me, and I opened this vision of my life, and it was really a fork in the road. And on the one side of it, there was the dreams I'd had of going to Harvard and making something of my life. And then there was this other path that I was on that I kind of woke up and realized, what am I doing here? Like, what happened in my life? It really didn't feel like a conscious choice had been made.
Yeah, it was that slippery slope that they talk about where it was just little by little you slipped into it until you were so deep into it, you had to really make a decision to get out.
Totally. I've heard the phrase a creeping non-choice. That's what it felt like. And
Mhm.
there I was with this platinum blonde wig on my head. And I knew in that moment, a lot of addicts say that they knew they were gonna die. I wasn't about to die at all. I was about to live a very long, tortured life of cycles of trying to clean up and then relapsing back into drugs and prostitution over and over and over and over again. I'd already had 3 of those cycles. And in that moment, God told me, "Get up and get out of here right now, or this is all you're ever gonna be."
Wow.
And I just knew it. And it was really my childhood ambitions, my dreams of impacting the world somehow, and
Mhm.
contrasted with this life of endless cycles of just more of this. I got up. I mean, it took me a second. I thought about I really let it sink in. And I kinda checked in and I was like, "Is this true? Is this real?" And it was. It was very real and very clear. And I got up and I grabbed my jacket and I walked out the door. There were several people in that room. Joe Brown was sleeping on the bed behind me. I was in a pay by the hour/week hotel in San Francisco. There was a couple kicking heroin over to my left. I didn't know them well. I didn't say peep to anybody. I just grabbed my jacket and I walked out the door. And then I didn't know what I was gonna do. I had no plan. I had no game. I had no shuck and jive. I usually had a plan. I was quite the gal for like, I know what I'm about. I had no idea. I wasn't even living anywhere, Lisa. Um, so I went over to this guy Baltazar's house where I had some outfits stored and some cash in a drawer. He was a billionaire, so he didn't need my money. And he took one look at me and was repulsed and just pointed back to the bedroom area. And I just went back there and slept and then felt better and then put my pager on my hip, ready to go back to work that night. I thought I was just cleaning up and not going to drink or use anymore. That's what I thought. That would have lasted maybe 2 or 3 weeks.
Mm.
But what happened was I had a date that night, a first date with this super cute guy that I'd met at a gas station at 3 in the morning a couple days prior. He knew that I was a call girl. He could tell by my pager. This was now 1994. Nobody had cell phones yet, but I had a pager. And he had been a chauffeur for a call girl for a while, so he knew what I was up to professionally, and he was a sex addict. But he was a sex addict in drug and alcohol recovery. He had 4 years clean and sober at the time. And this was our first date, and he brought me to a 12-step meeting for drug and alcohol rehabilitation on our first date because he was so selfish that that's where he wanted to be before he was going to take me home. And I walked into that meeting and I got a 24-hour coin, and I have not had a drink or a drug since. I fell in love with the program, and it's been 30, almost 31 years clean and sober since that night. Thank you,
Awesome.
God.
Well done. Yes. Thank you, God. Thank you for that voice that came into your mind that night and woke you up, if you will, to getting your coat and stepping up and walking out of there.
So, but my struggles with addiction were just starting. I just turned to food and I started going to midnight 12-step meetings. And then at 1 a.m., I was hitting Taco Bell, 7-Eleven for 2 pints of ice cream, and Safeway for boxes of pasta and some candy bars. And I was going home and binging my brains out. And suddenly I was living with chronic obesity. And I was in meetings. Everyone was talking about drugs and alcohol. I was talking about what I'd eaten last night. And they're like, there's meetings for that. You could like go somewhere else. They started patting me on the head and saying, at least you're not smoking crack anymore. And I wanted to cry when they said that to me. Like, I was like, you have no idea how I'm eating. You would not be patting me on the head and saying, at least you're not smoking crack if you had any concept of what I'm doing every night at home alone. And so I went to food meetings, but if alcohol is your problem, they say put the plug in the jug. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm now food is my problem and I'm confused. I'm like, what's the plug? What's the jug? I don't know. I have
Right.
to eat. What am I
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. It's like
And
telling an
then,
alcoholic to walk into a liquor store and just pick one alcohol. Just pick
yeah,
one bottle. That does not work.
no. So I was going to meetings. I didn't know what to do, but I now had a support group to talk about the mounds of cookies that I ate last night. And I just got fatter, to be honest, and I didn't know what to do. And 12-step programs for food vary, and I gotta say there's 8 to 12 of them, depending on what you count and whether, some are kind of subcategories of others. And, you know, in any given city, there may be meetings for just a small handful of them. And they really vary by region, whatever. So I was at that time in San Jose, California, and then I moved up to Berkeley, California. And I wasn't finding strong recovery. So I didn't know what I was doing with my food. And that lasted for 8.5 years. Finally, I fell in with a group of people who told me to stop eating sugar, stop eating flour, and start weighing and measuring my food. And I got recovery. I got
Mm.
recovery. But back up, food is really different from drugs and alcohol because I couldn't function. I mean, as soon as I started using hard, I had to drop out of high school. I mean, I functioned for a while, 2 or 3 years, but I could not function the way I'm an addict, the way I need to use. There's no functioning on drugs and alcohol. With food, I could juice up with caffeine, sugar, and flour, and ace any project you sent my way. So on food, I went back to community college. Big props for the junior college, community college system in the United States of America. I am a huge fan. I would have had no, I mean, I don't know if I would have had no future, but it would have been a much harder road if I hadn't had that on-ramp back into my education. I was only 20. I got straight A's there. I already had some college credits because I took whatever. Anyway, and then I transferred to UC Berkeley and I got straight A's there. I spoke at the graduation, graduated with a degree in cognitive science, summa cum laude, Phi Beta Kappa, got into all 5 PhD programs I applied to, and then went off to get my PhD in the brain and cognitive sciences, which is a brand new field. This was hot off the presses. We were all now studying the mind and the brain, and I was kind of surreptitiously trying to figure out how a brain like mine could go so far off the rails. Like, what just happened to me? And so I started learning about the neuroscience of it and how it all worked. And I moved to Australia and got a postdoc in psychology and then became a tenured psychology professor. And that was my career for a long, long time. And I finally lost my weight and went from obese to slender right at the juncture of finishing up my PhD and flying to Australia for my postdoc. And then I started teaching a college course on the psychology of eating and the neuroscience of food addiction, taught that for 6 or 7 years. And then once again, God spoke to me in my morning meditation, uh, January 26th, 2014. And God said, write a book called Bright Line Eating.
Really, that clear?
That clear, clear as day. And it came with, again, like visions and emotion. It came with visions of me being on the couch at the morning show, Good Morning America or the Today Show or whatever, and the book being on the New York Times bestseller list. And it came with the pulsing waves of the impact of prayers. I'll never know if they were prayers being said right then. This was 5 a.m.
Mm.
East Coast time, maybe 5:30, between 5 and 5:30 a.m., January 26th. Cold winter morning, early morning. So I don't know if it was prayers being said right then. It might have been, but it might have been prayers throughout time. I'm not sure, of people in the fetal position on the floor saying, God, you've got to help me with my food and my weight. I cannot keep eating like this. This is madness. God, you've got to help me. I don't know how to eat. You need to help me. And these were unanswered, as yet unanswered prayers. And I needed to write a book called Bright Line Eating and explain to people why they kept not being able to stick with a food plan, that whatever food plan they were starting, they weren't sticking with it. And it wasn't getting them, happy, thin and free, as we talk about. I do have an issue with that word thin now. I think it's, I don't know. I just don't use that tagline anymore, as great as it is, just because thin is not well. Right? Like, I was thin when I was on crystal meth. I was super thin, but thin is not well. And not everybody gets what, Cosmo magazine would call thin
Right.
when they're bright. Right. And so I just don't use that tagline anymore. So we talk about bright bodies as opposed to, bright bodies are bodies that, are following the bright lines. The brain is freed up from that food fog that you talked about, and the person's living
Yeah,
their life as opposed to focusing on their food and their weight.
exactly. It's so good. It's so good, Susan. The work that you're doing is so incredibly important. And I have no doubt that that was directly a God nudge, tapping you to say, I need you to do this for all the people out there who are complaining and asking for help, because you have been such a resource for help that way. And one of the things that hits me so well, I am a very logical thinker. I need to understand the why behind things. And the two things that are part of your bright lines, the no sugar, no flour, really hit our brain in a unique kind of way. And they make our brain addictive, much like the drugs that you and your friends of that time were having trouble stepping away from. So tell us a little bit about how, from the brain neurological side of it, how are those two elements affecting our brains?
Yeah, totally. Well, interestingly, the first studies on addiction in the brain were done in rodents, as all of those neuroscience experiments are, but they didn't use alcohol or other known addictive agents. They used glucose,
Oh,
and yeah, they just gave the rats glucose, and they then tracked the dopamine response in the nucleus accumbens. It's the mesolimbic reward pathway. It's the addiction center in the brain. It's super deep in the brain. If you think of the brain as like a cue ball or something, it's kind of right in the middle.
Mm.
And it's sort of right above the brainstem. You got the primitive lizard brain coming up, and then right above that, you've got this little circuitry there that basically its job is to make sure that you have enough motivation to remember and then seek out and get or do or consume or whatever what's necessary for your survival. So this is like food, sex, you know, if anything hits that part of the brain as salient as like, "Oh, yeah, that'll do," like honey, you find a thing of honey and you get it out away from the bees somehow, that part of the brain just goes wild. But that's about as good as you can do in nature, and honey is hard to get because it's guarded by those bees. So, like, interestingly, a patch of ripe blueberries might have done it for our ancestors. Today, that's what people are telling you to eat when you're trying to not be addictive. But, that was a good thing. Or sexual stimulation, like seeing people from the next tribe over, they're bathing in the river, but you're behind a tree and now you're intrigued, you're glancing, and that part of the brain is lighting up. But that's a far cry from a donut or porn.
Right.
Very, very different, right? And so what a scientist would call them are supernatural stimuli. These excessively magnified stimuli hit that
Mm.
part of the brain and flood it with dopamine beyond what it ever could have possibly experienced back in the day, a
In nature.
thousand years ago, right,
Yeah.
in nature. And those receptors go wild. They wire for memory. They remember the cues that predicted that reward. What was happening right before? Where is it? What's happening? And what am I feeling? What am I feeling? That feeling becomes a precursor. People say, "Susan, I'm an emotional eater." And I'm like, well, an emotional eater is just another flavor of an addictive eater, because if the emotions are the predecessors, the precursors of your addictive response, then yeah, every time you feel stressed, you keep hitting the ice cream. Okay, well, your brain is remembering that as the antecedent and saying, now it's time for a fix.
Mhm.
So anyway, those receptors love it, but it's also excessive. And somehow they know that. The brain is always searching to reclaim its equilibrium, just like temperature, hydration levels, all these things need to be within a band, a pretty narrow band that for our survival. And dopamine levels seem to be about the same. So you give it way too much. What happens is the dopamine receptors respond by thinning out,
Mm.
becoming less numerous, less responsive. They call it downregulation. So now we're rewiring the brain for addiction, which is all cool in the gang if you plan to hit Starbucks and then the vending machine and then the pizza place and that's how you plan to live your day. Because now all of a sudden, every 1 to 2 hours, you're going to need to top up with some more sugar and flour just to get through your day. Because if you don't have enough dopamine now at baseline to feel normal. You now feel restless, irritable, discontented, itchy, uncomfortable, antsy, depressed, stressed, disquieted. You don't feel right. And what happens is that part of your brain goes, "Oh, I got to go get something for this." And
Mhm.
it could be one click shopping on Amazon. It could be, scrolling through social media. It could be going to all these things release dopamine. You could be drinking a glass of wine. You could be smoking a cigarette. You could be having another cup of coffee, or you could be going to eat. And if, addictions need to wire up separately in all those different domains. If food is your go-to, you're going for whatever, a muffin and a latte, a bag of chips, whatever your thing is. So that is one of the ways that sugar and flour hit the brain. Now, I have data coming out of my lab published showing that within just 8 weeks, my program turns that around. So those receptors will heal. If you stop flooding those centers with sugar and flour, you give someone enough to focus on during that time so they don't go out of their mind. um, AKA the Bright Line Eating Boot Camp that we help people get through those first 8 weeks. After about week 3, the receptors start healing. They heal so much by week 8 that those cravings have gone down to little or no cravings anymore. On
Amazing.
average, not for everybody, but on average, and that was a pretty large. I believe there were 1,200 people in that study, so pretty large sample size.
Yeah. That's another whole nother topic we could talk about because I just love all the research that you bring out of your experiences. It's just pouring data back into the
Yeah,
system
and we
again.
should because I just published a couple great studies in a super top journal, Frontiers in Psychiatry, second top journal in the world in that field, and I have some things to say about GLP-1 drugs, which we might wanna cover as well because there's been a lot of data coming out about those.
Okay,
So,
let's
yeah.
make sure we do that. Before we move on to those things, you were talking about the deregulation. Would that be accurate to kind of compare it to almost like the tolerance buildup that when you have a person who has never had alcohol could have one drink and feels the effects. After they have more, they need two or three drinks to have that same effect. Is that similar to what that
Yeah,
downregulation is?
sure. Yeah, I think that's one of the pathways that builds tolerance. But there's lots of pathways that build tolerance, and the reality is that we're building tolerance to things all the time. That's what the brain does. We adapt. I mean, here's a simple thing. You sit down in a chair, there's a broad, flat pressure that's pretty pronounced against the back of your thighs. But you may not notice it at first, but you certainly aren't noticing it after you've been sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes. Those skin cell sensors adapt pretty quickly to that constant intense stimulation, and they just stop reporting it to the brain. They're
Huh,
like, "That doesn't matter. It's been happening for a while." We're adapting to everything. I mean, you walk into a dark movie theater, your eyes adjust. You walk out of the dark movie theater, your eyes adjust. All the time. That's what the brain does. It's always just toggling the dials
mm,
on the instrument panel to make sure that whatever's happening is baseline now. So you start eating a lot of food, well, it's gonna toggle the dials. You better be willing to keep eating that much food because that's now what you need.
right. Oh, exactly. Okay. And I wanted to get back. You were talking about the addictions and how there came that point where you had to make a change. And maybe for those someone out there who's listening today who's never really been into drugs, but we all know those people we've seen here and there who are really heavy. Like I'm talking 2, 3, 400 pounds heavy. And they haven't always been that heavy. So there had to been a point where they had to make a choice, a conscious choice to, in your vernacular, to grab the jacket and leave the room.
Yeah, well, let me speak to that if I may for a
Yeah.
second because, there is something that I think needs to be understood, which is that level of obesity is not actually a mark of extreme food addiction. That level of obesity is a mark of genes that produce obesity. So, at the same level of eating, one person might be 200 pounds and another person might be 400 pounds, depending on their genetic background. You cannot look at someone who's 400 pounds and say, "You gluttonous person, how come you're eating that much?" It is likely that what's happened is our entirely insane obesogenic food environment is interacting with their genetic profile, which 5,000 years ago, frankly, meant they were the one who was gonna survive the winter, right? These were
Right.
super adaptive genes to have in a different food environment. In this food environment, they're a curse. Um, and the type of protection against obesity that many people have of just a strong metabolism and adipose cells that don't seem to be inclined to just sock away fat, from, this or that, overeating at this or that meal. It's just the genetic lottery, frankly.
Mm,
There is a correlation between obesity and food addiction. It's moderate. It's not that strong. And actually the 2 BMI categories that are most likely to have a very advanced food addiction are class 3 obesity and underweight.
oh, interesting.
Yeah, like what I would call run of the mill obesity now, which is the average, class 1, class 2 obesity. Someone at that level of obesity is less likely to have food addiction than someone who's underweight. Um, and, bright line eating isn't for people who need it. It's for people who want it and are willing to work it. Lots of people we might think need it, whatever. Not my judgment call to make, but if they want it and they're willing to work it, whether they're underweight, normal weight, you know, overweight, class 1 obesity, class 2 obesity, class 3 obesity, if they're deciding, you know what, my eating is not serving me, and I really would like a path that frees me up from this, um, I think I wanna do bright line eating. That's who this program is for.
Yeah. So much of that stems, doesn't it, Susan, from just the mindset and how we look at ourselves and how we look at it, the food and the things that we're putting into our body. I think the mindset is a big piece of that and just
Totally.
understanding. Yeah, such a big part of that. Let's get back to the research because I know that's such a passion of yours.
Yeah.
I know it lights you up, and
Yeah.
I know there's so much rich data that's coming out that we've never really had before. Tell us about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, totally. Well, we just published in Frontiers in Psychiatry a paper called 6-Year Follow-Up of an abstinence-based food recovery approach to weight maintenance. And our 6-year data look significantly better than weight loss drugs 4-year data. So people are maintaining more weight loss who are working our program in our membership than people on Ozempic 4 years out. So, um, let me just describe what's happening with weight loss drugs right now. The data are in, and let me just be the first one to tell y'all, weight loss drugs are not gonna solve our obesity pandemic. They are not. And the main reason for that is people are getting off of them in droves. 85% of people are off of them within 2 years. Now, some of them are off because of side effects. Some of them are off because of cost, and some of them are off because they literally can't stand living in a world where they don't get pleasure anymore out of a muffin and a latte. They can eat the muffin and the latte, but they don't enjoy it, and that's a deal breaker for them. But let me tell you why most people are getting off these drugs within 2 years. What happens on these drugs is people lose weight satisfactorily quickly in the first year and 3 months. That's the average span of weight loss, 1 year and 3 months. On Ozempic and Wegovy, that weight loss is averaging 15%. On Mounjaro and Zepbound, the tirzepatides, it's averaging maybe 20, 25%. But either way, for most people, it's not all the weight that they need to lose. Let's imagine you go on Ozempic or Wegovy, and you are a woman who is 200 pounds, and you think your ideal weight is 130 pounds. So you've got 70 pounds to lose. You're likely to lose 30 pounds in the first 1 year and 3 months, and you're likely to feel pretty good about that. Now, let's imagine you're savvy and you're not paying market price for these drugs. You're going directly to the Novo Nordisk website and you're getting the half off coupon that they offer. So now you're getting these drugs for $497 a month. So you're paying $500 a month for this shot. $500 a month. Cha-ching, cha-ching, cha-ching. 1 year and 3 months in, you're okay with that. Now your weight loss stops. You weigh 170 pounds. You think you should weigh 130 pounds. You lose no weight in your, 16th month. The next month, you don't lose any weight either. $500. The next month, you don't lose any weight either. $500. The next month, you're up a pound. $500. The month after that, you're up another pound, $500. Between a year and a half and 4 years, people regain a third of the weight that they had lost. So you're about to watch yourself regain 7 pounds. You only got down to 170. You're about to creep back up to 177, and you're still paying $500 every month. Lisa, are you staying on that drug?
No way.
Right? You think this didn't work for me. The jig is up, right? And that's an average. That's the scenario, right? So the reality is that these drugs can be an effective part of a program. What they do is they pull down cravings and they pull down excessive hunger and they put them into totally manageable levels. And if you're being driven by wild cravings and hunger, that can be a total miracle for you. But you're going to need to work a program like Bright Line Eating or some other kind of program. You're going to need to watch your protein intake. You're going to need to be weight training because you don't want to lose too much muscle and bone. you're going to need to actually do something to lose and maintain your weight, not to mention the psychological aspect. This is what my fifth book that's coming out in April is all about. It's called Maintain. And it's about the surprising psychology of keeping weight off, which is not something people tend to think about. People are doing these drugs as as a magic pill. They're doing them as, now I don't have to even worry about that. The problem is going to be solved for me. And they're very disillusioned when that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and some of the side effects are quite serious actually too.
There's
Mm.
one that nobody's talking about. There was a paper in a top journal. I mean, something like JAMA or the New England Journal of Medicine or something. And it was about neon. Have you heard about neon?
No, no.
Non-arteritic ischemic optic neuropathy. Do you know what neuropathy is in your feet
Yes.
where you can't feel your toes? They
Yes.
literally go numb on you.
Uh-huh.
It's that, but in the optic nerve.
Oh, goodness.
So your optic nerve goes numb and you start to see some spots and then you go randomly quickly blind in one eye, out of the blue, not reversible. And neon is happening in people on GLP-1 drugs at, I think, pretty startling rates. Something like, people with diabetes or obesity who aren't on those drugs but are on other drugs for the treatment of it are getting neon events at like 2 and 3% of them are. And then people on these drugs are 8 and 9% of them are. And it's like, that's a lot of people. Why aren't we
Eerie.
talking about that?
Right. Well, and there's pancreatitis and thyroiditis and these other things that are starting.
Bowel obstructions,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Scary stuff. Definitely the way to go is something like bright line eating. I'm just going to point all my listeners back to that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pro-choice about these drugs. I mean, and that's mainly because even having just said about the neon, which does scare me, I've suffered so much with food that if someone cannot manage their food, your life is over. If you're eating the way I used to eat, you have no life. I'm a late stage hope to die food addict.
Mm.
And I absolutely know if I were in one of my phases of life where I were back in the food, I would be trying these drugs for sure.
Yeah.
Because the alternative is so bleak.
And there's side effects to being heavy too. So that's.
Yes, exactly. So I'm pro-choice. Everything's nuanced. Talk with your doctor, search your conscience, but yes, bright line eating does offer a very viable alternative, and our long-term data are better than weight loss drugs long-term data.
I love that. And much fewer side effects. So let's celebrate that. I could probably talk with you for another hour, but I just want to be real sensitive to your time. So how could people find you and learn more about bright line eating if they'd like to?
So easy, brightlineeating.com. As a matter of fact, we have a free masterclass that's a 2-hour. If you geeked out and liked it when I started talking about the dopamine downregulation and what happened, like I have a whole 2-hour deep dive on that. And it also explains why you can't count calories, track macros, or have free foods, those sorts of things, it's actually a surprising reason that you might have never thought of before. I also talk about why exercise won't make you thin. There's good science on that. It's a hard-hitting 2 hours. It's totally free. It's my gift to the world. It's my gift to you. And you can just access it at brightlineeating.com, and that's where you can find me. You can also find me at Barnes& and Noble. I'm sure you can pick up Bright Line Eating there.
Yeah.
We also have a great cookbook that you'll probably find at Barnes& and Noble or Amazon.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can find me on social media, all the usual places.
Wonderful. I will put those links for sure in the show notes. And I've listened to the masterclass. It's amazing. I have seen the book, read the book. It's amazing. And you have what, 5? Is it 5 books now?
The 5th will be coming out in April. So the
Oh,
first
my
book is
goodness.
Bright Line Eating, and that really lays out the science. Really, there's more detailed science in that book than there is anywhere else. The second book is the cookbook. The third book is called Resume. And this is a book I wrote after years of struggle with relapse. And it's all about the science of relapse, what to do if you relapse, how to get back on track, and more importantly, how to inoculate yourself against relapse, the mindset of how not to fall into the shame spiral after you eat something off your plan. Bright lines do set up a perfectionist tendency, right? And you need Resume, the book Resume, and then our course that's in our membership, Reboot Resume, is all about learning the art of surfing the wave, of living bright so that you're never falling into that, danger and destruction, shame spiral zone. So that book is all about relapse. The fourth book is called On This Bright Day, and it's a daily meditation reader. It's one of those books that gives you a page a day, and it just gives you a little nugget of, hopefully wisdom, inspiration, insight, a quote, a little passage, and then a mantra to take into your day. And then, like I said, the fifth book will be called Maintain, and it's all about maintenance, which nobody else talks about deeply. I mean, it's a big vacuum in our world is effective talk about the real identity shift that goes into actually being someone who could tolerate living in your bright body for life. It's a big identity shift. If you've
Yes.
struggled with your weight your whole life, you likely have unknowingly gotten comfortable, all too comfortable with giving way too much of your identity and your thought to that problem of your food and your weight. And to actually break free of that is maybe harder than you think. You might be subconsciously picking up the problem again and again and again just to avoid having to face life without it, shockingly.
So true.
Um, yeah.
So true. Well, before we wrap up, I know you've got just a couple moments left. Is there any final encouragement or a word that you'd like to give the audience that's listening?
Ah, well, I think we've had a pretty good conversation. But if you're struggling with your food and your weight, I just want you to know how much I see you and love you and get you and resonate with you. And I just want you to know that there is a solution. And it does take you crafting it. There is a solution for you. You are an individual. And bright line eating can give you a lot of material to craft your brightest life free from the food and the weight. But you're going to need to do it. It does take ponying up and investing. It takes some time, it takes some resources, it takes being willing to step into a much brighter life. But I always like to say that, the woman who is going to invent the solution to cold fusion isn't even working on her equations right now because she's going keto for the third time this year. She's Googling WW to see if they're really bankrupt or if they still have a program. She's, trying to get to the gym to run a bit because she thinks that it'll help. She's not even working on her equations. There is so much human potential and purpose and mission-driven positive action that's not happening because people are focused on their food and their weight. And that's what bright line eating is about, is freeing up all of that human capacity so that people can be focusing on their life instead of what the bathroom scale is telling them in the morning.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Susan Peirce Thompson, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. And I would love to have you back sometime. You're just amazing. So thank you again for being with us. Appreciate you so much.
I would come back anytime. That was wonderful. Thanks, Lisa.
So you can see why Susan Peirce Thompson is just such a bright light in my life, actually. I have 6 amazing takeaways for you today. Number 1, bright line eating works through a lightweight structure. Unlike modern diets these days, bright line eating has 4 clear boundaries. No sugar, no flour, 3 meals a day, and weigh or measure your portions. This kind of lightweight structure brings freedom and order to your life, just like the lines do on the freeway to keep you safe and in your lane. Once your meals are planned and your portions are all set, all that extra energy that you're wasting around food is freed to be used for your life so you can stop obsessing about food. Because Brightline Eating is rooted in neuroscience and behavioral psychology, it is a rock-solid framework to help people understand their addictive patterns, what limiting mindsets and beliefs they have, and how they can live happy, healthy, and free. Number 2, food addiction is real and it's complex and it's very, very unique to each individual. Sugar and flour flood the brain with reward pathways similar to addictive drugs, which causes cravings and compulsions. And recovery from these kinds of addictions is possible, but it does take work. The dopamine receptors can heal by giving our body just 8 short weeks without these foods. Then you can reset your future path to find the freedom that you really crave. Number 3, obesity does not always indicate food addiction. Our genetics strongly influence our body weight. I'm sure you've seen this, as 2 people can eat sometimes the very same thing and have drastically different dress sizes. But remember, sometimes those people are just as unhappy about the situation that you are potentially judging, and they feel frustrated that seemingly nothing they try seems to make a difference. Bright Line Eating is for anyone who is ready to learn, willing to take action, and do the mental work necessary to shift your life so you can really live happy, healthy, and free. Number 4, weight loss drugs are not a magic fix. Most people who are on a GLP-1, like Ozempic, for example, end up going off that drug within about 2 years. And they do that either due to the side effects, the cost, or simply because the results that they were getting have plateaued. Some of those side effects are rare and some are quite serious. And yet, being overweight too has its own risks and impacts on long-term health. So bottom line here is, just don't jump into a drug without doing your research. Permanent results require permanent change, but you can find freedom and enjoy life on the other side. Number 5, hope and purpose is found on the other side of recovery. Dr. Susan Peirce Thompson's journey from a variety of addictive drugs to food addiction demonstrates that healing is possible, even after years of cycling over and over through those chronic struggles. But who better to help you than someone who has walked that very difficult path? Just imagine how much more you could accomplish in your life if food and your weight were no longer a thought. Ever. That's a beautiful thought. All right, number 6, and my final takeaway for you today is actually more of a reminder, some practical resources for you to remember. I want you to really seriously consider looking on Susan Peirce Thompson's website because she does have this amazing information-packed and free masterclass. You can find that at brightlineeating.com. I've looked at the masterclass, I've listened to it, I've attended it a couple of times. And let me just tell you, there's no pressure to buy anything at the end. She will invite you to participate in the boot camp if that's something of interest to you, but the information stands on its own. There's no long drawn out, wait until you see what this recipe is, which somehow never actually is given. So no, Susan, in all her real and approachable brilliance, just simply explores the science of addiction and dopamine and relapse and why calories and macro counting do not work. You, my friend, have nothing to lose here. Well, except for maybe weight, if you're overweight. And you have everything to gain, including weight, if you're underweight. But the information and knowledge that she presents is going to equip you and help you claim your future life of permanently, forever feeling happy, healthy, and free. And remember, she also has some amazing books, 5 of them now. So look for those links in the show notes. I promise you this will be information that will equip you, encourage you, and embolden you with the strength and power that you need to make better decisions. And that's a wrap, my friends, on our final episode here for the Hidden Health Hazards series, where we uncovered all the hidden health hazards, starting with the air we breathe in episode 88, the food we eat in episode 89, those dangerous and crazy seed oils that are hiding in our food like everywhere in episode number 90, the danger of ignoring our need for sleep in episode 91, and the toxic dangers hiding in our mouth in episode 92, and the addictive properties of toxic foods like flour and sugar, and how to kick that habit so you can live happy, healthy, and free with this episode right here, number 93. So thank you so much for joining us for the series, and if you missed one of them, just head on back and take a listen or listen to it a second time. The information is scientifically backed, and it is sure to help you live your life happy, healthier, and free so you can focus on the dreams that God put on your heart to accomplish in this life. So thank you again for joining me, and I will look forward to seeing you right back here next week at the Sunshine Cafe.